Hello and welcome back to the Transfer Show, brought to you by IG Trading and Investments, where we debate the latest links, rumours and deals taking place across the January window. Today, the spotlight is on Liverpool after another disappointing result on the weekend. Question marks over what they're going to do, if anything, in the transfer window. And we're going to be looking ahead to summer 2026 as well to see where we can fix their problems. Joining me today, once again, David Ornstein. How are we doing?
Thank you for having me. One last time in this transfer window. It's been fun.
I know we're going to miss you after this month. Hopefully we'll be reconvening in the summer. And James Allcott is also here. Thanks for coming back on the show.
Yeah, looking forward to it. It's lovely to meet David for the first time. And I just want to listen, to be honest, because this is where the goss comes from.
Well, there will be lots to discuss, so stick around to the end of the show for our smartest investment of the week, brought to you by IG Trading and Investments. But first, let's get into it. Liverpool. I mean, David, let's kick off because you broke a story at the end of last week about Andy Robertson going to Tottenham. Of course, that situation has changed since then. What's happened and what's the latest on this potential move?
Yeah, I think Tottenham were among a number of clubs who wanted to sign Andy Robertson as a free agent in the summer when his deal at Liverpool will be coming to an end. There was always the possibility in their mind that they would bring that forward if the right deal could be struck in the January window. And we've seen how Tottenham have been very active in the market, trying to strengthen in terms of quality, numbers, experience, leadership, culture, and Robertson would tick most of those boxes. I also think they've had struggles at left back in terms of Doggy's fitness, Ben Davies' double surgery, Jed Spence having to deputise there. Their new signing from Brazil is a young player who possibly will go out on loan. I don't know how ready he is now. So it made a lot of sense for their admiration to sort of manifest itself now. There was a big question in all of that, though, is Liverpool and Robertson himself. So talks were clearly taking place, and we now learn that an agreement in principle was there. That's certainly the view of Tottenham. But it kind of rested on decisions, final calls from Liverpool and the player himself, because he would be a big departure, even though he's not first choice now and Milos Kerkez has stepped up. Robertson is a key figure at Anfield, both on the pitch and behind the scenes in the dressing room. He's a massive character and his record and success speaks for itself, his influence too. But there was another factor in all of that, and it was that it would leave Liverpool light on the left-back area. And so they've got the possibility to bring back Kostas Tsimikas from his loan at Roma. I don't think it was a recall option. It was more that Roma would be open to the possibility, provided they got a replacement, and that wasn't a panic buy. It was somebody that they actually want, and most likely a young talent who they've had their eye on for a while. That seemed to be a problem. And so you will have seen reports on Sunday evening that the deal was not progressing and is not progressing at that moment, at this moment in time. That's not to say in the week ahead, Roma won't find a solution that allows Tsimikas to come back and the deal is resurrected, revived, and it's possible that he could still go to Tottenham. We're not at that place right now, so we're going to have to see how the final days of the market go. And obviously the clock is ticking, so the closer you get to the deadline, the more difficult it becomes. But yeah, that still is one to keep an eye on in the sort of hours and days ahead.
Yeah, we'll see where that situation lies, even by the time people are watching this at home. But it does feel like, a few moving parts there. I mean, James, were you surprised by this news when it dropped?
Yeah.
And, regardless, I guess, do you feel like Liverpool need to make some defensive signings this month?
I think that's what surprises me about it, is that, as you said, that would leave Liverpool even more light, and they are incredibly light already. Robertson's such a leader for that group as well. I guess with all these kind of transfers, there's Tottenham who want the player, there's Liverpool who might be allowed to let the player go, but then there's the player himself. The one thing that I am intrigued by is his feelings on it, like truly, in terms of, first of all, how he ends at Liverpool, because it has been the defining club of his career, obviously, but also the World Cup and how he feels about that and how many games he wants to play, how hard he wants to push it. because I think, worse than anything would be him being, I'm touching wood as someone who's half Scottish, as someone who ends up getting injured and misses that World Cup. But at the same time, you want to be fine-tuned for it. So for him, I wonder if there's an element there where he feels he needs to be playing. I'm guessing from that point of view. But if I was Liverpool, there's not much money you're going to be making from this. So I would keep him, absolutely, to have that leader in the dressing room.
Yeah, it's a good point you make about the World Cup there. That hadn't actually crossed my mind. But yeah, certainly feels like that would be part of his thinking. I mean, speaking of Liverpool and the defence and the lack of cover there, David, Marc Guehi obviously is at Man City. He's had a positive start to life there as well on the weekend. Why didn't Liverpool go back in for him? And are there any other centre-backs, any other options that they may have their eye on?
Well, Liverpool were planning to go back in for him. Their intention was to do so next summer when he becomes a free agent. Whatever we think on the outside, they've made their calculations and deliberations internally, and that was to go for him last summer when he had 12 months left at a value that they felt was appropriate for that player at that time. And it was a £35 million offer that was accepted. He was in a machine undergoing his medical, the MRI scans, and then Crystal Palace pulled the plug on it.
David, with that, was part of it the wages as well? In terms of it happening in August, were the wages from Liverpool's side of it more appropriate? Because in terms of it going to Man City, a lot of, when I did a video on it talking about it, what a lot of people were talking about was the wages for Marc Guehi at Man City, and that Liverpool should have walked away. Was that any part of this?
Well, certainly you imagine it would have been a lower level last summer than it will be if he had become a free agent next summer and all the riches that come with that. And certainly you imagine Manchester City will have had to put a package together to get him in January that would have been pretty much commensurate. I don't even know if you have to pay a premium to get him at this point in time. In 4 months, he could have his pick of clubs and more wealth with it. The suggestions we've had are around £300,000 a week plus bonuses. Others around Manchester City have denied that and said it's lower. So again, unless you're involved in these deals, it's not so clear. The word coming from Anfield is that financial package, both in terms of the transfer fee, which finished at £20 million, plus the salary and the agent's commission, which is really significant too, is not something they were prepared to fund at this moment in time. That's their prerogative. Others say that no, the real reason is that after what happened with Liverpool last summer, Marc Guehi chose that Manchester City was the club for him this time round. And if he had told Liverpool, come and get me, then they probably would have. I'm not pontificating on this. It's like he said, she said sort of thing. And Marc Guehi, in his interview with Manchester City television, said it was always City. So we'll just have to take his word for it. So that ship has sailed now. And whatever the recriminations, Liverpool move on. Centre-back is going to be their key area of focus for next summer, not only because of what happened with Guehi, the injury to Leone, Virgil van Dijk at an age where you need to be looking for successors, but also heading into the final 12 months of his contract. Joe Gomez heading into the final 12 months of his contract and with a checkered injury record. He came very close to leaving on deadline day before Liverpool stopped that. And so it'll be really fascinating. You'll see all names mentioned. I've seen in recent days Jacquet of Rennes and various others. I don't have a firm grasp on it now, and I'm not sure it's entirely clear internally, because there's so much still to play for this season. Definite decisions don't tend to be made around now unless you're doing pre-contract agreement for the summer. So that is an area that Liverpool fans will understandably be paying really close attention to, but not the only area, because we wait to see what happens on Mohamed Salah and his reintegration. He will also only have 12 months to go. Clearly, there's something lacking in Liverpool's attacking department. There's been the injury to Isak, the integration of Ekitike, which has gone well, but it's still early days. The lack of a replacement through the market for Luis Diaz, which I think is an underspoken loss to Liverpool. It maybe hasn't had the emphasis that it should have. And Rio Ngamoa is such a talent, but he's still so young, and Liverpool are protecting him, which is understandable. So even when you look in bits of midfield, you question what might they do there. Endo, would he depart? So despite such a heavy investment last summer, I do think there is more work to do in the summer of 2026. And I know everybody points to the headline figure of what they spent, but they also recouped a lot. So there is that net spend, which before everybody shouts at this and says, you don't say that about other clubs, we absolutely do. You probably just don't watch us saying it.
Yeah, I mean, and beyond the figure of net spend as well, it's the significance of the players who left as well, right? Luis Diaz in particular feels like such a big miss on the left wing with Cody Gakpo's struggles this season. We'll get on to the summer in a little bit, because James is going to bring some dream signings. We might ask David whether any of them are feasible. But let's get on to Arne Slot now, because, I mean, James, how would you be feeling if you were Slot in his position right now? Just slipped out of the top four, still only 2 points off Man United in fourth, but only 3 points off Sunderland in 11th. It's very, very tight there in the mid-table. Man City obviously got the centre-back that you wanted last summer as well. Would you be demanding signings right now from the Liverpool board? Like, how would you be feeling?
I think it's really difficult for Arne Slot. I think he'd be concerned about the performances, kind of even more concerned about the results, and concerned about his future. I think, understandably so. I think I've spoken about it a couple of times on my podcast, and we were talking about sort of stick clubs and twist clubs, and it feels like there has to be a conversation about Arne Slot, because the results are just nowhere near good enough, and the performances feel erratic, and it feels like he's trying a lot of different things due to injuries and a lot of different things. We just spent 10 minutes talking about how light they are in defence, so that needs to be remembered. But it does feel like something's slightly awry. It doesn't totally feel like he wholeheartedly knows the answers to get them out of this, and the amount of draws that are occurring, it's poor, like, overall. And the biggest thing that you absolutely cannot get away from, and everything I listen to when we're talking about Liverpool and Arne Slot and his future, is Xabi Alonso. There's a big shadow there, or elephant, or whatever you want to use, and I think it's very, very difficult, because he is so alluring to Liverpool as a manager here. So Arne Slot, yes, he's got the title from last year, but the performances this year and the money that has already been spent, it feels like it's not a scenario where he can demand too much, although it would be absolutely reasonable, I think, in particular, to focus on the defensive side, to be honest. Yeah,
I mean, it felt significant, didn't it, that Jamie Carragher, kind of one of his biggest public backers, said on Monday Night Football that if Liverpool don't qualify for the Champions League, then there do have to be questions about Arne Slot's position.
I think that's spot on, by the way.
Yeah.
I think, Jamie's not afraid of that, which I think is why he's brilliant. And it's absolutely spot on, and it's fair. It's fair as well. If he's, you cannot spend that amount of money and not finish in the Champions League.
It's surely the death knell for Slot, because when Jamie Carragher said that Maresca, he wrote a column in the Telegraph saying, I don't see Maresca being the Chelsea coach next season. He was gone within a week, I think.
I think he did hammer him the day before as well.
Yeah.
He's not good enough.
Him as well, yeah. No, I'm being facetious. But it's really interesting, and the scrutiny's there. When you're Liverpool head coach manager, you're open to that sort of that exposure, and the expectations of the club are so huge, and this domestic season has been really poor so far by their standards. Their points are way off what they were at this point last season, and Arsenal, for example, who they were ahead of, are now way ahead of them. I think it's really harsh to say he won with Klopp's squad last season. I know there were a lot of players left over, but Klopp didn't win in his last season. So obviously it was taken to a higher level by Slot, and he deserves immense credit for that. It seems like the club are giving him time, even if many supporters aren't yet. And every time you make checks on this, you're told nothing before the summer. So clearly the summer, like we see at many clubs, is a time for review, and it'd be fascinating to see which way Liverpool and other teams go at that point. naturally, if results deteriorate to an alarming degree, I presume the hierarchy at any club, even though they're backing their head coach manager, will have to think about it. But I think the intention is at Liverpool is to back him, and you know there are many players who are at an age and a stage of their contract who will be leaving the club at some point, whether it be next summer or the following, and they're big presences, and many of the signings that have been made are for the future, in terms of Isak, Ekitike, Kirkez, Frimpong, Mamadashvili, Leone, and so on. And their vision will have been that Slot is the one to take them forward, and that he's a signing for the future. So I don't think we can write him off yet. I don't think we can ignore the Champions League progress, and that there's opportunity for success there. And we know that's a rarefied environment, as similar things being said at Tottenham right now. But yeah, I mean, it's a really tense situation. It needs to improve. It's not at the level Liverpool fans, Liverpool as a club, have come to know and expect. And the onus is on Slot, really, and that sporting hierarchy of Richard Hughes, Michael Edwards and co to turn it round.
Yeah, I think the final thing to say on that, from my point of view, is that, yes, I think he'll get till May. I think he will. And I think Liverpool, there'll be a lot of talk because you never know and it's football. But I think they will get into the Champions League. The big question is how they get there. Do they creep over the line, or are you starting to see, a formula that they can carry on into the next year? That will be the decider for him staying or going, in my opinion.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, another player who obviously there's been a lot of speculation about this season, recently, reintegrated into the squad after AFCON, Mo Salah. He'll have a year left on his contract this summer. Do you expect to see him leave Anfield? Are there any noises coming out of Liverpool regarding his future?
I think that's a really interesting topic that needs to be resolved or given time for clarity to be established, because we cannot just dismiss the flare-up that happened before AFCON. And, the comments were absolutely remarkable post-Leeds. That seems to be a theme. Salah, Amorim, maybe it's something about Ellen Road.
Yeah.
And it was a good time that he went to the Africa Cup of Nations for the dust to just settle and people to calm down. He came back in training with a smile on his face, and he starts at Bournemouth, but his performance level is at the moment is not anywhere near what we know he's capable of, and let's see if he can recapture that in the months ahead. It was fascinating at the time of the contract renewal. I and many others just saw a player who was posting ridiculous numbers again, looked in fantastic physical, technical condition, and pretty much anyone would have said he was worthy of that new deal. It was a departure for the hierarchy, for FSG, the ownership, because they don't usually award those contracts to that age. And they did with both Salah and Van Dijk. We've seen at clubs like Arsenal where an Aubameyang and Ozil play really well before getting those contracts. They get the contracts, then something changes, whether it's on their part or the club's part or a bit of both. Performance levels dip, and then before you know it, they're gone. And I'm really intrigued to see how the post-AFCON reintegration goes, both in terms of the relationship with Slot, who he personally sort of called out, and with the club, who clearly he was dissatisfied with some things about, and whether it can all just calm down, they can get back to playing well, getting results. If the reintegration goes well, then presumably they'll look to carry on towards the end of his contract in 2027. If it doesn't, there's definitely a conversation to be had in the summer. Do we continue or do we part ways? If they're going to part ways, it leaves a massive hole. It leaves a hole that Liverpool will have been thinking about for some time, given he might not have signed that contract. He might have left previously. They liked somebody like Antoine Semenyo and would have had many other options for that position, but Salah was there. So the day that he leaves, they need to be well prepared for a gulf, a chasm that his departure will leave. And that's why, alongside central defence, you've got to assume that is a key area of focus, but we don't know whether he'll continue or not.
Yeah, interesting times with Salah. James, I believe you've got a few dream signings to help fix Liverpool.
Sorry,
roll up.
I've got you know me, I kind of go, I was more the second word that you'd used earlier on, feasible. I was just trying to think about what Liverpool need right now. what conversation I kind of wanted to have with David and put to him as well. So I'm going to chuck out a few names if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think it's the defence for me that I kind of wanted to focus on. So you guys are asking for sort of 2 or 3. I'll be chucking out a few names here. But the centre-back position, I think, has to be resolved. And I think in terms of where they want to go, I think Leone is really exciting. Konate, I don't know what the situation is there right now, but it feels precarious. Marc Guehi, that's not worked out. Virgil van Dijk, how many more years are you going to get out of him? So definitely need a centre-back. And I think you need one who can be sort of a really great B-side alongside Van Dijk and actually kind of overtake him maybe and become the A-side. And then maybe another profile that can maybe grow with Leone so that pretty soon, in 18 months' time, you've got 3 really, really good centre-backs to move forward with. So I think the first one, which feels like a tap-in for me, or feels very obvious, is Schlotterbeck. I feel like with his contract, which I think is 2027, that makes it always a bit more feasible in my eyes. His ability to progress with the ball, his ability to dribble with the ball. I think what Liverpool are really struggling with is a positivity about their play at times, both with the ball and without the ball. And I can chuck in a midfield option because I've been thinking about that as well. But in terms of centre-backs, I think Schlotterbeck is a really good choice. I think they could get it done. I think he can go to new heights. He has had issues with injuries. That would be my concern there. But he's so talented. And yeah, I don't know how much that one would cost. But I sort of had a little search around. I'm rubbish with the numbers. But
with a year left on his deal,
exactly,
not that much, right? Unless he was to put pen to paper on a new one.
Yeah, and he's good enough. He's wholeheartedly good enough. So I think he would be wonderful. The thing that people will be maybe talk about in the comments, which I find really interesting, is Van Dijk is obviously, right-footed, but has always kind of played on that left-hand side. So there's this idea that he absolutely cannot go and play on the right-hand side. He's right-footed. Schlotterbeck's left-footed. So there may be a little move there, which would feel odd. But going back to what we were talking about with Salah, what Van Dijk did a lot was that he does that switch or that pass over to Salah. But if Salah is not there, then maybe that same pass isn't needed. Maybe that's Frimpong, maybe you do. But Virgil van Dijk can definitely move 10 yards over to the other side of the pitch, and I think he would be okay. So I'd love to see Schlotterbeck. Then it's the next profile. Jeremy Jacquet, from what I hear, is Chelsea seem to be very, very keen on him. He's a great centre-back. But the person I think is quite interesting is Ramon at Como.
Okay.
He's 21. He was at Real Madrid. Got sold to Como in this summer. Only like 2.5 million euros, I think. So he's got that kind of pedigree of being at Real Madrid. And he's a big boy. And I think playing under Cesc Fabregas, that is a guy who really wants to kind of implement a positive approach to the way that a team plays, maybe complicated if you want to use that word in terms of the tactical setup. And he's done brilliantly. So I think if you could go and get someone like that, yes, he's only gone there this summer, but that's at quite a cheap price. Leone, I think, moved as well the year before, and then they've gone and got him because they know that he's good enough. So you've got... I would have a look at him as an option who's going to win all his aerial duels, which I think is another thing that Liverpool fans are a bit worried about. I think in the way that the Premier League is right now, that when, say, you play Frimpong and Kirkes and McAllister, all of a sudden, and Salah, you start to feel and look a little bit small. So having a really, really dominant centre-back like Ramon, I think could be a good option of someone who you can kind of bring in, and then all of a sudden you've got those 3 that we were talking about. And then, this is the one that I wanted to talk to David about, was fullbacks. So, Robertson on his way. The right back's an interesting one. Obviously, Trent doesn't work just yet, but that feels like just easy transfer news, in my opinion, in terms of him kind of coming back. But on the right-hand side, and the left-hand side, you've got an opportunity possibly to bring in another fullback. Now, you've got Frimpong, you've got Bradley, of course, he's injured. The player or the playmaker that you've kind of lost is Trent. So in right back, one name I did want to chuck out there was Pedro Porro, who obviously struggling at Spurs, or Spurs are struggling. So there could be an opportunity there. But in terms of great fullbacks in this league, and if you want to set up a team that's going to be great for the next 6-7 years, would they have a look at Newcastle again? And have a look at Lewis Hall, who's, I think, signed quite a long deal, to be fair, and will cost a solid amount of money, but is Premier League proven already. a fantastic player, and if you buy him, like Robertson when they bought him, they didn't know at the time. You've got a guy who's set for 8-9 years if you want to do that. And then Livramento obviously is another player that I think Man City have kind of had a little look at, but is again, those two fullbacks, I think you're struggling to see a better set of fullbacks out there. So the question I kind of had was that after everything that's happened with Liverpool and Newcastle, what is the situation with Newcastle in terms of them looking to improve their squad, and if they would have to sell these kind of exciting players? Like, where are they in the food chain?
Well, I love this bit because last week with Julian Alvarez, by just answering a question from Clive, it blew up into David Ornstein says Arsenal are going for Julian Alvarez next summer, which I absolutely didn't say. So please take this as conversational. Firstly, remiss of me that I didn't mention the Konate contract situation when we were talking about the big summer ahead. There's no agreement as things stand, and unless there's a breakthrough, he's going to be on his way for free. So that would leave a big hole too. So you started with the centre-backs. Yeah, I don't actually have names. I do have a great admiration for Schlotterbeck. He's been heavily linked with the Premier League for some time, obviously before he made the Dortmund move and since. I always feel he's a little bit slight as a figure, and I'd be quite intrigued to see how he responds physically to the Premier League. Maybe needs to bulk up further, but he's an immense talent. He's in that lovely position of left-footed, left-sided centre-back that so many are looking for. He was being talked about and looked at for so long, as well as Hincapié. They were the two that were the hot property, and Jacquet, as far as we know, Chelsea are in a very strong position on that, but I don't think anything's closed yet, so there'll be loads of suitors for him, and let's see how it unfolds. The fullback positions I hadn't thought of so much, just because of the surgery that's been done there, and it would be quite unusual for a club of Liverpool's stature and how well planned they are to suddenly recruit again. Although, of course, if Robertson leaves, then there is valid reason for depth. Not so much at right back, because they consciously went and brought Frimpong post Trent Alexander-Arnold. Did you mention an Alexander-Arnold return, or was I imagining
I've just seen a couple of bits of that. I think for me, yes, they've gone and bought a left back and a right back, but I don't think either have wholeheartedly worked yet.
Yeah, I would just say on the right side that with Bradley when he's fit, which is frustrating for Liverpool, and the possibility of using, I know they don't like this, but the Szoboszlai's, Curtis Jones's, and Joe Gomez's of this world. It doesn't feel one that's quite as pressing as other positions, so it's not that priority. Manchester City have long liked Tino Livramento, and they're not the only ones in the Premier League. I don't know of Liverpool being in that mix, but others are. On the left side, again, I'm not linking to Lewis Hall at all. Your question was more about Newcastle. It's a bit of a pinch point for them now, isn't it? Let's see if they get back in the Champions League next season. They're doing well in the group stage now. Got a big match coming up against PSG. But, Eddie Howe keeps referring to PSR. Again, it's becoming the story of Newcastle's modern existence under the new ownership. And of course, that's going to change to SCR, squad cost rules or ratio or whatever. And some big decisions will need to be made. If they have spent very heavily under Eddie Howe, and they needed to, but a lot of the spending is why they're kind of in this position. So maybe the spending needs to be a bit better. I would suspect people like Lewis Hall, one of their very top performers, is absolutely one of the last people on the agenda to be traded.
I totally agree that Newcastle, and you guys will be, Newcastle fans will be saying that in the comments, and I totally understand it. People said the same about Isak. That's my sort of side on it. And if you're coming from Liverpool's angle, you go, who are the best fullbacks out there? Because we want to be the best.
Well, two things on that. Isak, we learned over the course of the summer, wanted to go and had made this clear at various points to the club. We don't know anything of that nature on Lewis Hall.
And his dad, I think isn't his dad a Newcastle fan, I think? So that might
there's that, and people could watch this and say, well, you said the same on Isak at the time. So let's wait and see. But I maybe even the resolve of Newcastle and their Saudi-led ownership is strengthened by what happened with Isak, that we're not going to let that happen to us again in the future unless it gets to a crazy number. And you could argue that they're being proved right to have sold Isak for that number. It was extortionate, and unfortunately for him, the broken leg has curtailed his progress so far. What Newcastle might reflect on is, could they have replaced him better than they've done so far? It's still relatively early days for Voltemade and Wissa. But fullbacks generally are more replaceable than the attacking players. Clubs are more open to that. I just don't think Lewis Hall departure will be anywhere near the forefront of their minds, but it's a really interesting situation at Newcastle, and it may be that clubs target them with their financial situation and try and test the waters.
Yeah.
So there we have it. Let us know your thoughts on what Liverpool need to do. What would your dream signings be in the summer or even in the next week as well? Let's finish off the show with our smartest investment of the week, brought to you by IG Trading and Investments. An intelligent piece of business or a potential piece of business, a rumour that you really like that you've seen in the last 7 days. James, I'll start with you. What's tickled your fancy?
Just the story that I just think is incredible, and I can't figure out if it's just like a power move or with the context around it. It has to be the Mateta transfer rumours of him going to Nottingham Forest. They play Nottingham Forest on Sunday. All the history that's happened in terms of Nottingham Forest taking their spot in the Europa League, and I think was there a fine that the Crystal Palace club got because they had a banner about Mr. Marinakis. So I'd love to know if Mr. Marinakis, has just gone, and if it works, then we can get it done, fine. But if it doesn't, we've continued to destabilise. First of all, a team that's in the relegation zone alongside them, but also just, I guess, a possible foe in Crystal Palace, because they are destabilised anyway. When it comes to this season, they are spiralling at the moment. So this just adds a little bit to it. So, as soon as I saw it, I just thought, oof, wow.
Yeah, it would certainly be a statement, wouldn't it? Especially with Lorenzo Luca coming in on loan as well. Really looking to bolster that forward line. David, what have you liked that you've seen the last week?
I was going to go for Ryan at Bournemouth, but I used Bournemouth previously this month with Alexander Toth, and I feel I need to broaden my horizons. So I'm going to go for one I reported just before we started recording this, and it's that Douglas Luiz is set to re-sign for Aston Villa. They're close to agreements on that. He has committed to reuniting with Unai Emery, and I think it's going to be a loan with an option to buy. So you would break the Nottingham Forest loan and strike a new deal with Juventus. And in the process of reporting that, I spoke to so many people who said for Douglas Luiz, it was only Aston Villa. He's fixated on it. He obviously has such fond memories from his previous spell. And I think he only left because of the PSR situation at Villa. Otherwise, he probably would have stayed. Remember that January when Arsenal came for him with 3, 4, 5 bids, and Villa stood firm, and they knew the player was so committed he signed a new contract after that. So it's quite romantic in the midst of Aston Villa having a remarkable injury crisis of 3 brilliant midfielders in McGinn, Kamara and Tielemans. They've still got good midfielders and they'll be coming back. So this would seem to suit all parties. Chelsea were interested in him. They evaluated a short-term deal for him. Ultimately, they decided not to crack on with that, and they're going to prioritise the likes of Andre Santos and their existing options, which is fair enough. But I am really intrigued to see how Douglas Luiz, who hasn't played much for Nottingham Forest, but we know there's a good player in there, he's been a Brazil international, can help Aston Villa try and contest for the Premier League title, and even if that doesn't happen, regain a place in the Champions League. So yeah, Big Dougie back in the big time.
Yeah, I'd absolutely love to see that happen. I feel like Unai Emery was the manager who really got the best out of him as well after he came in. What was it, after Gerrard in 2022? Yeah. I've finish off with mine quickly. To go on to the Mateta situation, Jurgen Strand-Larsen being linked with Crystal Palace if Mateta leaves for Nottingham Forest. What a kind of merry-go-round in the Premier League that would be. And again, I think that would be a really attractive move Strand Larsen, one of the top scorers in the Premier League last season, really took to the league really, really well. But this season has obviously struggled in a really struggling Wolves side. And at Palace, would be joining an attack which, has served Mateta really, really well. He knows that kind of system, playing with 2 10s behind him. Also been linked with Leeds as well. But I feel like with Calvert-Lewin's form, they're less in need of a striker, at least if Mateta does leave Crystal Palace. But that's all we have time for this week on the Transfer Show, brought to you by IG Trading and Investments. Let us know your thoughts below about Liverpool and all the potential deals taking place across the last week of the window. Thanks, David.
A pleasure. Thanks for having me this month.
Thanks, James.
Thanks. Yeah, appreciate it.
And we will catch you next week for a special live stream in the hours before the deadline shuts. See you later.